2025, we are in the fourth year and day 302 since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. A warm welcome, I greet you. For today's situation report, there are fires again, even in Russia's core areas. Why Moscow's reports of success from the Kupiansk area once again do not match reality, and why an incident in the Russian capital is far more explosive than it appears at first glance. And of course, much more as well. To begin with, once again, the most important thing is a drone strike. An oil loading port near Tamarin, close to the Kerch Bridge, is on fire. According to current information, in addition to the port, 2 oil tankers were also hit. I haven't received confirmation about the 2 tankers yet. The report is still new. But let's start with another question. What is Satire actually allowed to do? Putin and the Kremlin have been spreading the false claim for years that the current Ukrainian government was not legitimately elected. They claim that the official term of office has already expired and that they are still in power. The part about the expired term is of course true. However, the country is at war due to a Russian attack which prevents new elections from taking place at all. There will never be new elections during a war in any country in the world. And Putin is just trying to stick to a demand that considers a possible ceasefire. But at the same time, he also knows that there won't be one because the demand is not acceptable. But he can still put pressure on, since he links it to a ceasefire that the United States also wants to see. And that's why the pressure on Ukraine continues to increase. Putin loses nothing here, since the government either stays in place and he can blame Ukraine for the lack of a ceasefire, or Ukraine gives in. And he can push for new elections that could favor a party inclined toward the Kremlin. And he's currently preparing this scenario. So back to the earlier question. What is Satire actually allowed to do? Putin suggests that in the event of a new election in Ukraine, Ukrainians living in Russia should also be allowed to vote, since they also have the right to vote, even though they no longer live in Ukraine. He himself speaks of about 5 to 10 million people. First of all, who is supposed to verify these numbers and citizens? Second, who conducts the election? That's simple. The Russian Election Commission, which also excluded every serious opposition member in the last elections in Russia, and brought the flawless Democrat back to the top of the votes. Of course, the partial election is only supposed to take place on Russian territory and only under Russian observation. So you could let 10 million pro-Russian citizens vote or 10 million Ukrainian citizens vote and simply have their votes switched back to pro-Russian ones and have a huge impact on Ukraine's election. Around 34 million people in Ukraine can vote. Of course, not all of them will vote for one party, but if you add 10 million more votes, elections could of course result in a Kremlin-loyal candidate coming to power, or the government could be hindered in some areas by a new, strongly Russia-backed opposition in its ability to work and act. Such ideas always have some goal that people want to achieve here, and in this case, it's very easy to recognize. I don't get how the Russians call Kupiansk a complete victory again, but still can't show any proof. And now they're also uploading videos where they leave their position with their commander and retreat. How does that fit together? Share your thoughts in the comments. While Russians retreat east at Kupiansk, they're attacking again at Dobropilja. Where is Dobropilja? It's down here in the area of Pokrovsk, right at this spot, up here. This is the place the Russians are trying to reach, but there's still a large Ukrainian defensive line in front of it. And here, it's the same pattern and the same result as with other attacks. Ukrainian units of the 110th, 142nd, and 55th Assault Brigade were able to stop a Russian attack here, which once again took the typical form of a blunt column assault. But that wasn't the only attack. There's another one over here near Siversk that's actually really important to report. The Russians managed to gain ground here. They were able to capture the hills north of Sviatokrovsk here. In the end, the units of the 110th are fighting here. Mountain Infantry Brigade, 54th Mechanized, and 81st. Airborne Brigade against Russian units of the 2nd Army Corps. But here, they are superior in sheer numbers. So, usually, there are always more soldiers in a Russian brigade or in a Russian battalion than in a Ukrainian one. Russians are increasing pressure, capturing villages around Siversk. Sviatokrovsk remains contested, and up here, they're increasing the pressure as well. The area marked in yellow could soon be dominated by the Russians, or it might already be under Russian control by now. There are many geolocations right in the middle here, but nothing where we can say they're firmly in and have solid control. These are mostly geolocations from Ukrainian drones that are fighting Russian soldiers attacking here. That's why I can't mark them as conquerors, of course, but still, the pressure up here is high. They're trying to reach the road here, and at the same time, they're increasing the pressure to here. Ukrainian units have to keep regrouping and moving closer together in order to hold the hills that are here. And that's a big problem. I think that the Russians will gain the upper hand in this area if the Ukrainians don't bring in new reinforcements, even though it will be a long and costly process. This morning, there was a targeted attack on a high-ranking Russian general in the south of Moscow. Lieutenant General Fadil Savarov, former head of operational training for the Russian General Staff, was killed by a car bomb. Investigators say the explosive device was placed under his vehicle and detonated soon after he began driving in his residential parking lot. He was seriously injured and died in the hospital. The Russian Investigative Committee even confirmed the assassination attempt today, which is considered very unusual, and also stated that several possible scenarios are being investigated. One is the possible involvement of Ukrainian intelligence, though no official attribution yet. He was directly involved in the war against Ukraine and had previously served in Chechnya and the Russian operation in Syria. What is remarkable is not so much the individual attack as the pattern behind it. He is not the first Russian general to be killed in Moscow by a targeted attack. In recent months, there have been repeated explosions, firearm attacks, or acts of sabotage against high-ranking military and security-related individuals, sometimes also in the capital. Isn't Moscow known as Russia's most secure area? The fact that another general was killed there by a car bomb shows a growing vulnerability of the Russian power and security apparatus in its own center. Regardless of who was responsible, the attack has a clear impact. It signals that high-ranking officers and key figures in the war can no longer assume they are safe far from the front lines. Ukrainians are attacking Russian cavalry again. It's possible that not only did they run out of infantry fighting vehicles on that section of the front, but also out of mopeds, so they have to resort to using horses again. There's also a good reason for that. Of course, it's a shame for the horses that the last major cavalry charges came to an end with the massive introduction of various machine guns in World War I. But there's more happening. Russian turtle tanks have also returned to the field. Here they simply cut open the front of a shipping container and mounted it on the tank. Of course, that obstructs visibility in all directions and you can only shoot forward, which is obviously a bit suboptimal, but we already saw that with the first models back then. It seems seeing isn't that important, since the tank will eventually be destroyed by a drone strike anyway. Saboteurs broke into a Russian airfield near Lipetsk at night, destroying a Sukhoi 30 and Sukhoi 27. Did they do that by pouring flammable substances into the air intake and igniting them? The damage is estimated at about $100 million. Special thanks to Algo Crew channel members, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renica, Robert Silla, and Dietrich. As always, thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next report.